Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, I've been on a few trains recently and I've encountered the big first world problem, and that, of course, is being unable to unlock my phone using Face ID without lowering my face mask and risk being chased off by people with pitchforks and torches. So I entered my PIN instead. And it's quite amusing that Apple had removed the Touch ID in favour of Face ID, and then we've all worn masks ever since. But what if there was a better solution? Then, while Googling away, I came across a company called UnifyID. And UnifyID helps identify and authenticate individuals based on the way they move and walk, and leveraging machine learning algorithms and sensors in smartphone devices. There are so many different use cases, from contact payments, physical access to buildings, user authentication, and fraud reduction and payment platforms. So my curious side got the better of me. I had to find out more. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to San Francisco so we can talk about all this and much more with John from UnifyID. So a massive warm welcome to the show, John. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I am the founder and CEO of a company called UnifyID. At UnifyID, we do authentication. We can authenticate people based on their behavior, things like the way that they walk or the way that they hold their phone, or there's all these other very unique things about each individual that make us all unique, but and you can use those for authentication. It's called behavioral biometrics, and it's, it really it helps to strike that balance between usability and security. Often those things are at conflict with each other. And, we try to make it so you can get the best of both worlds. You can just be yourself, and there's enough that's unique about you. We can actually authenticate you.
And there's so many reasons I was excited to get you on the podcast. But I suppose the main thing is, and it is a first world problem, but just when we had gotten used to seamless payments and unlocking our phone with our face or fingerprint and making payments, the pandemic meant that our hands and face ended up covered up with gloves or masks. So can you set the scene now and tell me more about how traditional second factor authentication and those methods could increase friction and end up just hurting that end user experience that we've all just seamlessly got used to, haven't we?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And we've seen this as well. So with authentication, there's really three classes of factors that you use. One is a knowledge-based factor, like something you know. That could be a password. It could also be something like your mother's maiden name or social security number, date of birth, like these type of things. This is, knowledge that you have that is supposed to be kept private. And then, you can supply that knowledge, and then that's how you can verify somebody's identity, right? A second category is something you have. This could be your phone. It could be, some type of physical card. It could be, like a USB dongle that you plug in. Each of these are something that you have and they possess, and then you can use that to prove who you are. And the final category is, something that you are, like a biometric, and the most typical, the most traditional ones that people think about when they think about biometrics are things like your fingerprint. Because most people they have fingerprints. They're mostly unique, and then you could use that by supplying your fingerprint. You can use that to prove who you are. Facial recognition is also one that's quite common as well. And so what we do fits within this third category, which is something that you are. And this because we, instead of looking like a static biometric like your face or fingerprint, which is very easy to get stolen or compromised, we use something about your behavior, something that's very unique about the way that you operate in the world. One of the factors you use is things like gait, like the way that you walk. And so what that means is that, when you, walk up to make a purchase, at a store, for example, and your phone is just sitting there in your pocket, we know that it's you. We know it's you when you're walking up to to make that purchase, or you're trying to unlock that door, whatever it is. We already know that it's you because the way that you move is very unique to you. And the accuracy is actually on par. It's about comparable to a physical fingerprint. So, about a 1 in 50,000 false positive rate, based purely on your unique motion. And so, in the case of a store, like you go up to make that purchase, instead of having to, hold up your phone and do some type of facial recognition, which obviously doesn't work very well when you're wearing masks or fingerprints with gloves. We already know that it's you even before you make the purchase. And so that gives us a big advantage, in terms of providing a more seamless authentication experience.
So am I right in saying then that you're able to identify and authenticate any individual based on the way they move and walk by leveraging machine learning algorithms and sensors in smartphone devices? Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And we most of our unique technology is around motion sensors. We use other sensors as well on the phone, things like the way you interact with the touchscreen, things like your location, Bluetooth devices that are around you, these other things that, can tell you a lot about your environment. But the motion aspect they have is very unique and is very accurate. Like I mentioned, we can get accuracy on par with a physical fingerprints based purely on somebody's motion.
It's incredibly cool. Do you have any use cases just to help anyone listening understand how it could work in their world?
Yeah. So many use cases are in the physical world, like things like for smart locks, alarm systems, like access control, physical access control, where, previously, you used to have to carry around keys. Now and more, they're moving to keyless systems where you can just have seamless entry. It could be into your house, could be into your car, travel as well. Like any cases where there's friction involved in some physical, this type of physical interactions, using our technology, your phone can stay in your pocket or it's in your hand, and as you walk, then we know that it's you, and so you can have a much more seamless experience and kind of physical access. Payments as well, real world payments is another big use case for us. Another one is around call centers. If one of the worst authentication experiences is when you have to dial into a call center and they ask you all these questions and some of which you may not even have the answers to. And it's also a big vector for social engineering attacks where people will call, fraudsters will call up and try to get into your account or, try to take over your account by tricking the call center agent. And so, with using UnifyID, when you dial into the call center, we know not only the fact that the call is coming from your phone, but actually who is the person who's holding the phone at that time, just leading to a much more seamless authentication experience on the phone.
It's incredibly cool. And I think anyone that's had problems at identifying or unlocking their phone when they're wearing a mask will be incredibly interested. And of course, for the techies listening, how does it work? Can you tell me a little bit more about the tech that makes it all possible?
Yeah, so we make an SDK for iOS and Android. It just sits in the background. It's about 2 megabytes or so in your app, and then you get access to the sensor data. And then it uses that to build a model of a user's behavior. And then by watching them over time and then seeing what is the normal behavior for a user, including every time that when you start walking, it just starts recording, on the accelerometer and the gyroscope, and then recording that sensor data. And then it builds a model basically to figure out what makes you unique compared to anyone else. So more in the more technical sense, it's actually, we use a neural network, for this, and it's a classification problem where it's trying to decide as data comes in, does this look more like you or does this look more like other people in the world? And we've built a very sophisticated model that's able to train, actually on the local device to be able to very accurately distinguish between you and an attacker or somebody else who's trying to use your phone and operate your phone. And there's, so we make this SDK, this model. It also gets backed up on the cloud, so you can actually go and access this on new devices. For example, I get a new phone, download the model to that phone, and then evaluate that to figure out, is this the same user, who has set up this new phone, or is this somebody who just happened to know, my username and my password? And that's basically how it works. And there's a lot of science behind it. We've been working on this for over 5 years now, with a very smart team. And, and there's a lot of interesting, signal processing and machine learning that happens in the background, but the result is honestly just magical. It's just, you just be yourself. And then there's enough that's unique about you that we can actually authenticate you in many cases.
It's incredibly cool. It really is. And I suppose from a technology point of view, humans have always been considered the weakest link in security. So I've got to ask though, what was it that inspired you to go out there and change that with Unifi?
Yeah. I mean, the truth is that the state of security in the world, and online security is really poor today. I mean, like the status quo today is really using things like passwords, and in some cases, they'll use things like a 2FA, like a two-factor authentication based on like receiving an SMS message. Like they'll send a message to your phone number. They'll say, type in this 6-digit code. And then that's kind of how you prove that you have access to that phone number. But that's really the status quo today. And it's, the truth is that we can do so much better. For the longest time, humans have had to adapt to the limitations of technology. Yeah. And now technology is now hit to the point where, instead of humans having to adapt to the limitations of technology is beginning to meet people where they are. I mean, I think that the biggest parallel to this is you look at, in the early days, there was, the primary interface for interfacing with technology was, a keyboard and then later a mouse. But that's the way it was for a long time. And there were systems that did things like speech recognition, but they were very primitive and they just didn't work very well. Eventually, what happened is the technology had reached a point where it got good enough. Like it got good enough in recognizing what you say, that you can start to have these new modalities of interaction with technology. Like, you can talk with Siri or with Alexa or, Google or any of these assistants. And they're not perfect, but they do a good enough job that it actually enabled this type of interaction, which is much more natural and much more human, honestly. And, in much the same way, we're leveraging machine learning to do much the same thing. So instead of let me try to remember this, 10 character or 12 character password with a letter, a number, and a symbol, and then use that to prove my identity, which is a very artificial construct that, really has only been around for maybe the last 40 years or so. Instead, we're going to recognize people based on who they are. Like, if you think the problem of authentication goes back prehistoric times, right? How do I know you are who you say you are? Well, I can listen to your voice. I can see your face. I can see your possessions. I can see the context under which I see you. All of these things are, sum up. And then that's, to the things that make you, you. And we all have neural networks that have evolved over millions and millions of years that are very, very good at this, by taking these little subtle cues and then using that to figure out who you are. If you think about the time like when you were a child and then you hear footsteps, and even the only information you have is just like the sound from those footsteps, but often you know who the person is, just based purely on the sound of their walking. And so in much the same way, there's all these things that make us unique. And then it's possible to train neural networks and use machine learning to exploit these type of differences in individuals and then use them for something positive like authentication.
And I think so much has changed over the last 12 months, and we've all had to evolve and adapt to go with that. And if we take something like simply unlocking our phone when we've got gloves and a mask on, possibly, I love what you've done here to adapt to that. But I'm curious, what trends are you seeing in security, authentication, and fraud detection? Are there a lot of big changes happening out there?
Yeah. I mean, this is really, just really over the last few years. So first of all, authentication is becoming less of a binary yes or no, and it's becoming more of like a probability distribution. And the truth was, it always was that way. Just because somebody happens to supply the right password, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right user. right? And so nowadays, then, to strike the right balance between security and user experience, the organizations are using more of these type of probabilistic models. They say, well, okay, what IP address do we see this coming from? Is this coming from a known device or, a new device? Like, what is the user's location? What is the user trying to do? Each of these things, and then they feed into these risk models that dynamically decide, well, what, do I trust this user? Does something seem fishy here? Do I need to require the user to do some type of step up authentication, or do I just, prioritize a seamless experience and just, let them through? And so more and more, organizations are thinking of authentication less as a binary yes or no, and more of, well, okay, just in terms of understanding the risks and the context. And that's where we come in, and the things like your smartphone and other sensors in your life come in, because you now have this rich set of information where you can understand much more about the context of what the user is trying to do and whether it's the right user or not, without having to bother the end user. That's really the key, is that you can't design a security system in isolation, like without considering user experience. Because if you try to do that, then what happens is you may design a very secure system, but it's so secure that normal users don't want to use it. There's lots of ways to make things secure. Like, you can require people to have very long passwords, not reuse passwords, change them often. You can require people to carry extra things around and plug them in, every time they want to authenticate. But that doesn't really operate the way that it doesn't really take the human element into account, and the fact that people, they want to be productive, and they don't like a lot of friction, right? And the truth is that especially if you are an end user facing brand or a consumer facing brand, if you have too much friction in your experience, like, users will just go and use a different service. They have very low tolerance for friction involved in authentication. And so the brands that are able to differentiate like that, who are able to prioritize user experience while maintaining security, those are going to be the ones that are going to win out.
And as someone that's working right in the heart of the industry here and in San Francisco, what excites you about the future of motion-based behavioral biometrics? What make you want to jump out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're on the cusp right now. Like, it wasn't too long ago that things like, like, people were not carrying, like, not everyone was carrying around so phones, and like the machine learning technology wasn't as robust as it is today. Now, pretty much everyone carries around a phone. There's about a dozen sensors on every phone, that you can use. There's also, the advent of machine learning that allow you to crunch like very large amounts of data and very efficiently. And, the combination of these two really opens the door to allowing this type of capability. Probably 10 years ago, this would just not be technically possible. But now, both because there would not be enough data, as well as like not have enough on the machine learning technology side. Today it is, and this is really going to streamline a lot of these interactions. Even things like going to the store, for example. These type of interactions are going to change dramatically. Instead of I go into the store, I take some items off the shelf. There's a barcode on them. I'm going to scan them, and then I'll have a piece of plastic that that I'm going to use to pay. You're going to have a much more seamless experience. You're going to walk in. The store is actually going to know, the last time you were there. They're going to know about your preferences. You're going to take the item off the shelf. You're going to then walk out, and then you may receive a notification on your phone that says, "Oh, okay, I've just automatically charged you for these items," right? And so it's just a much more streamlined. It's going to be a much more streamlined experience. Also in travel, you think about things, especially as now people are prioritizing these type of touchless experiences, things like renting a car. It's like, you're not going to go and wait in line at a car rental counter to show your ID with their 10-year-old photo on it, and then get your pair of keys. No, you're going to have a mobile app. It's going to tell you exactly where the car is. You're going to use your phone to unlock the car. And it's just going to be a much more seamless and streamlined experience overall. And so I think this is a general trend that we're already starting to see, that you're going to start to see more of, where many of these areas of traditional areas of friction, that friction is going to start to melt away. And the brands that embrace this type of change are going to be the ones that are going to be the future leaders. And then the ones that are sticking to the old way of doing things, they're going to go the way of the blockbuster, and then, they're going to end up, being overtaken by some of these new modalities of interaction.
And what about yourselves at UnifyID? How are you planning on increasing adoption? Is there anything you can share on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is, we're a startup company. We got started in 2016. This is still a very new area of technology. Today we're working mostly with some of the more early adopter brands. Like, we don't make our own app. We interface and include our SDK in other existing apps, and allow them a more streamlined user experience there. So I think that early on, many of the apps that we work with, some are things like ride sharing apps or food delivery, grocery delivery apps, these type of things, where one big problem they have is around promotions fraud, where maybe a particular individual may sign up for multiple accounts, in order to take advantage of promotions, either on the end user side or on the provider side, like the driver or the shopper or, the worker side as well. And, because these brands spend a lot of money, in terms of promotions, in terms of trying to get people to join their platform. And they want to make sure that money is going to legitimate users and not to fraudsters who are just, setting up 10, 20, 30, 40 accounts just to take advantage of promotions multiple times. I mean, that's one use case. Another use case, we work closely with some companies around physical access for, entry into, both your business as your home and things like that. And we're working with some on the automotive side as well, for seamless access to cars. So in the future, you'll be able to unlock your car. You won't have to carry around keys anymore. You just have your phone, somewhere on you. You walk up to your car will unlock. It's a much more seamless experience there. And if somebody steals your phone, they won't be able to get into your car because their gate is different than yours. They're not able to unlock your car, based on that biometric motion. So these are just a few of the use cases. Financial services is also very big for us, both on the streamlining authentication side, things like, call centers, like I mentioned, also like card declined, transactions, like, the cases where your card got declined. Well, we can actually tell, well, this is actually the correct user in the correct spot. And this is not just somebody, not a fraudulent charge. And so allowing more of those charges to go through when it's actually the legitimate user. These are some of the use cases that we work with our customers today.
And I appreciate you probably can't share any names or anything like that, but I'm curious, have you, for anyone listening that might be following your community and your progress there, are you starting to get the attention of some of those big companies and the kind of thing that you can do by reimagining security, really?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, this is, we have very strong interest just across, just across multiple industries, many of them. So financial services is a big one for us. Many of these, marketplace, type of companies like a sharing economy, these type of companies as well. E-commerce, is big for us, and physical access as well. All of those are pretty big, verticals for us. And honestly, it's any case where there's friction associated with the authentication experience, but they also care about user experience and they want to provide a seamless user experience. But they have concerns about fraud. They have concerns about account takeover, these type of things. And like I mentioned today, it's mostly the early adopters that are adopting this type of technology. But already it's in some apps that are in the App Store and the Play Store. You'll start to see more of this technology embedded into more and more apps as you go forward, especially because it doesn't really cost anything in terms of on the end user experience side. You don't have to train users to do anything different. they can just be themselves. And then there's enough that's unique about them that they can actually get a strong authentication signal just based purely on their behavior.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today. It sounds like you've got an incredibly exciting future. But for anyone listening who would like to find out more information, maybe see some videos, how it works, or even contact your team, what's the best starting point for it?
Yeah, go to our website. It's UnifyID, and you can find a lot more. We have a developer portal there. It makes it really easy to get started. All of our APIs around gate and behavior. We have another capability called push off as well, which, is a secure, interaction that allows you to, authenticate somebody to authenticate themselves based on, in interaction on their phone. It's much cheaper and more secure, and a better user experience than using SMS. And you can also plug in the behavioral elements into that as well. So you can, instead of having to ask the user every time, you can take into account the user's environment and their behavior, and then use that as part of an adaptive authentication strategy. So you don't have to bother the user, every single time. But you can find all this information on our website. We also have videos, white papers, and more.
I absolutely love what you're doing here. And I think a lot of the friction points that you've mentioned today is something that we've all been through on an almost daily basis. And nobody likes the password. There's a lot of discussions about the death of the password. But being able to identify and authenticate individuals based on the way they move and walk, but just by leveraging machine learning algorithms and those sensors in smartphone devices, incredibly inspiring. But I'd love to stay in touch with you to see how this journey goes. But more than anything, just thank you for sharing your story with me today.
Absolutely, yeah, and thanks for having me on. It was great to get a chance to talk with you.
Motion-based behavioral biometrics. How cool is that? Your gate is your password. Man, that alone blew me away. And I also enjoyed talking about the new trends in security, authentication and fraud detection. And I, for one, will be following the progress of UnifyID very closely. As for you all listening, what did you like about what you heard today? What didn't you like? Please share your insights, expertise, and anything at all, even if it's just a question, by emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, and I'll return tomorrow with a great guest and another topic that we'll explore together. But as I always say, this podcast is not my podcast, it's our podcast, and you all at home or wherever you're listening are the real stars of the show. So keep those messages coming in, and we'll do it all again tomorrow. So thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.